There are moments in life when we expect God to speak in thunder. We imagine that when heaven wants to communicate something important, it must come with overwhelming power, with a voice that shakes the earth, or a vision that stops time. Yet so often the Holy Spirit chooses a much gentler way. He speaks in ways the heart can recognize long before the mind understands. His voice is not always loud, but it is always clear to the spirit that is listening. The Holy Spirit knows how easily the human heart becomes distracted by noise, by fear, by the constant demands of the world around us. And because of that, he often chooses the quiet pathways of communication. He moves through moments that seem ordinary on the surface, yet carry a whisper of heaven within them. You may be walking through your day, thinking about your responsibilities, your struggles, your prayers that seem unanswered. And suddenly something simple captures your attention. Perhaps it is an animal that appears unexpectedly. You might not think much of it at first. After all, animals are part of creation. They move freely in the world that God designed. But there are moments when their presence feels different. Moments when something inside you pauses. Moments when your spirit senses that what you are seeing is not simply a coincidence passing through your day. The Holy Spirit has always used creation as a canvas through which God's presence can be recognized. When you look at the vastness of the sky, when you watch the movement of the wind through the trees, when you hear the quiet rhythm of life in nature, something within you remembers that God is near. Creation itself carries the fingerprints of the Creator. Animals, in their simplicity and purity of instinct, live without the confusion that often clouds the human mind. They respond to the world around them with a sensitivity that many people have forgotten. They move according to rhythms placed within them by the same God who formed the stars. And sometimes the Holy Spirit allows their paths to intersect with ours in ways that awaken something deeper. You see, the Holy Spirit does not need grand displays to reveal spiritual truths. He understands that the heart often receives the most profound messages through the smallest signs. A quiet moment, a gentle presence, a simple encounter that carries a meaning only the Spirit can recognize. There are times when two animals appear together in your life at moments that seem strangely connected to your prayers or your thoughts. Perhaps you were asking God for guidance. Perhaps you were feeling alone, uncertain whether heaven truly sees the struggles you carry. And then in the middle of that quiet inner conversation with God, two animals appear where you did not expect them. Maybe they approach calmly, without fear. Maybe they cross your path in a place where animals rarely come. Maybe they appear repeatedly in moments when your heart is searching for reassurance. The natural mind might dismiss it quickly. It might say, "This is nothing. This is ordinary." But the Holy Spirit does not speak first to the natural mind. He speaks to the spirit within you. And when the spirit recognizes something sacred, there is a gentle stirring inside. It is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It is the quiet awareness that something more is happening than what the eyes can see. The Holy Spirit has a beautiful way of awakening our awareness to the unseen world without frightening us. He reveals spiritual realities with tenderness. He reminds us that heaven is closer than we think. Many people go through life believing they are walking alone. They carry burdens silently. They face battles that others cannot see. They pray in quiet places and sometimes wonder whether those prayers truly reach the heart of God. Yet the truth is that heaven has never been distant from those who seek the Lord. The Holy Spirit moves constantly around the lives of God's children. He protects, guides, comforts, and reveals truth at the exact moment when the heart needs it most. But his ways are often subtle because he desires relationship, not spectacle. He wants the heart to learn how to recognize his presence. When the Holy Spirit allows signs in creation to capture your attention, it is often an invitation to pause, an invitation to become aware that God is present in that very moment. And sometimes the appearance of two animals together carries a deeper reminder. It gently awakens the awareness that heaven is watching over your life, that the unseen realm is not distant or disconnected from your journey, that there are realities surrounding you that the physical eyes cannot always perceive. You see, the spiritual world is not far away. It is simply beyond the limits of our natural sight. The Holy Spirit is the one who opens the eyes of the heart so that we can sense what God is doing even when we cannot fully see it. And when he chooses to use something as simple as animals appearing in your path, it is not because the animals themselves hold power. It is because the Holy Spirit is drawing your attention to something greater. He is reminding you that creation itself responds to the voice of the Creator. There have been countless moments throughout history when God used ordinary things to reveal extraordinary truths. A burning bush in a quiet wilderness, a gentle dove descending from heaven, a small whisper heard in a cave. None of these moments looked dramatic to the outside world, yet they carried the presence of God. The Holy Spirit still works this way today. He still uses the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary. And those who learn to listen with their hearts begin to recognize that God is speaking far more often than they realized. Sometimes a person who feels forgotten suddenly experiences a moment like this. They notice two animals appearing calmly nearby while they are deep in prayer, and something inside them becomes still. A peace settles over their heart that was not there before. It is as if the Holy Spirit is gently saying, "You are not alone. Heaven sees you. Heaven knows where you are." The beauty of the Holy Spirit's communication is that it does not force belief. It invites awareness. It gently awakens faith rather than overwhelming the senses. And those who walk closely with God often begin to notice these quiet moments more frequently. Not because they are searching for signs everywhere, but because their hearts have become sensitive to the presence of the Holy Spirit. The world may continue moving around them with noise and distraction, yet within their spirit there is a deeper awareness. They begin to recognize that God's presence touches every part of life. Even the smallest details can carry reminders of heaven's care. So when the Holy Spirit allows your attention to be drawn to something unusual in creation, do not rush past the moment. Pause for a second. Let your heart become quiet. Ask the Holy Spirit what He might be showing you. You may discover that what looked ordinary at first was actually a gentle whisper from heaven, reminding you that the unseen world is closer than you ever imagined. And sometimes the simplest sign is enough to remind your soul that God has been walking beside you all along. There is a truth that many people sense deep within their spirit, even if they cannot always explain it with words. It is the quiet awareness that our lives are not watched only by human eyes. There is a divine order surrounding every person who walks with God, an unseen protection that moves with us through every season of life. And when the Holy Spirit begins to reveal this reality to the heart, something inside us awakens to the understanding that heaven has never been distant from our journey. God, in His infinite love and wisdom, has never intended for His children to walk this world unguarded. From the very beginning, He has surrounded His people with spiritual help that most of the time remains invisible to the human eye. These heavenly servants move according to God's command, fulfilling His will quietly and faithfully. They are not distant observers of our struggles. They are part of the divine care that God extends toward those who trust Him. The Holy Spirit often reveals this truth gradually. He does not overwhelm the heart with the mysteries of the unseen world all at once. Instead, He gently opens our understanding step by step. As we grow in faith, as we learn to recognize His voice, He begins to show us that the protection of God reaches further than we once realized. There are moments in life when a person faces danger they never saw coming. A sudden situation unfolds, something that could have ended very differently. Yet somehow something intervenes. A delay occurs. A change of direction happens at the exact moment it is needed. A circumstance shifts in a way that cannot easily be explained. And later, when the moment has passed and the heart becomes still, a quiet thought rises within the spirit. Perhaps I was not alone in that moment. You see, the Holy Spirit often reminds us that God's care is active, not passive. Heaven is not simply watching from a distance. God is involved in the details of our lives in ways that go far beyond what our eyes can perceive. And part of that divine involvement includes the angels God assigns to guard and guide His people. These guardians do not seek attention. They do not desire recognition. Their purpose is obedience to the will of God. They move when He commands. They protect when He instructs. They watch over the paths of those who belong to Him. Yet most of the time their presence remains hidden. Not because God wishes to keep His love secret, but because faith is meant to grow through trust rather than constant visible proof. The unseen nature of God's protection teaches the heart to rely on Him completely. However, there are moments when the Holy Spirit allows a glimpse of this heavenly care to reach our awareness. Not fully, not in a way that shifts our focus away from God, but just enough to remind us that His protection is real. Sometimes this awareness comes during prayer. A person who feels overwhelmed may suddenly sense a peace entering the room that they cannot explain. The atmosphere shifts. The heaviness that once surrounded them begins to lift. In that moment they realize that heaven has drawn near. Other times the reminder comes through circumstances in the natural world. Creation itself begins to reflect the quiet message that God's presence surrounds His children. When two animals appear together in a moment that feels deeply connected to your spiritual life, the Holy Spirit may be gently drawing your attention to the truth that God's guardianship is active around you. Not because the animals themselves carry spiritual power, but because creation can become a mirror through which God reminds us of His care. Think about the tenderness of God's ways. He understands the human heart. He knows that sometimes we need reassurance, not because our faith is weak, but because our journey has been heavy. There are seasons when the battles of life feel relentless. There are nights when prayers are whispered through tears, and the soul quietly wonders if heaven truly sees the struggle. And in those moments, the Holy Spirit sometimes allows a simple sign to appear in our path. Two animals crossing quietly nearby. Two creatures standing calmly where we least expected them. Their presence feels peaceful, almost intentional, as though they arrived at exactly the right moment. The mind might search for logical explanations, and that is natural. But the Spirit often senses something deeper. The Spirit recognizes when a moment carries a quiet echo of heaven. God does not need dramatic displays to show His protection. His love is often revealed through gentle reminders that awaken the heart rather than overwhelm the senses. When the Holy Spirit allows someone to notice something like this, it is not meant to create fascination with angels themselves. The focus is never meant to shift away from God. Instead, it reminds us that the care of heaven is active around our lives every single day. There have been moments when people later realize they were protected from dangers they never even knew existed. Situations they avoided without understanding why. Decisions they felt led to make that quietly redirected their path away from harm. Looking back, they recognized that the guidance they felt was not their own wisdom. It was the gentle leading of the Holy Spirit, directing their steps while unseen guardians carried out the will of God around them. The beauty of this truth is that it reveals the depth of God's personal care. He is not a distant creator who simply watches the world unfold. He is a father who watches over his children with attention and compassion. Every step you take matters to him. Every prayer you whisper is heard. Every struggle you carry is seen. And when the Holy Spirit reveals even the smallest glimpse of heaven's protection, it is meant to strengthen your faith in the one who commands that protection. Sometimes the appearance of two animals becomes a quiet moment of realization. Not a spectacle, not a mystery to obsess over, but a peaceful reminder that the world we see is not the only world that exists. There is a spiritual realm surrounding us, filled with the activity of God's presence. The Holy Spirit gently opens our awareness to this truth so that we will trust God more deeply. Not so we will search endlessly for signs, but so we will live with confidence that heaven walks with us. The guardians God appoints are faithful because they serve a faithful God. They move with purpose, guided by divine wisdom that sees far beyond human understanding. While we may not always see their work, their presence reflects the love of the one who sent them. And when the Holy Spirit allows your heart to sense that heaven is closer than you once believed, it is an invitation to rest in the certainty that God's protection surrounds your life even when you cannot see it. There is something deeply comforting about the way God confirms His presence to the human heart. The Holy Spirit understands that faith grows stronger when the heart recognizes that God is not silent, that heaven is attentive, and that the whispers of God often come with gentle confirmations that awaken our awareness. God has always had a beautiful way of repeating a message when it matters. When something is important, He does not leave His children in confusion. Instead, He allows confirmation to arrive in ways that strengthen the spirit and bring clarity to the heart. Throughout the history of faith, God has often used the pattern of two witnesses to confirm something meaningful. When the heart is uncertain, when the mind wonders whether something is coincidence or divine guidance, the Holy Spirit sometimes allows a second confirmation to appear. This is not meant to create curiosity or superstition. It is meant to calm the heart and remind the believer that God is attentive to their spiritual journey. And sometimes that confirmation appears through something as simple as the presence of two animals arriving together at just the right moment. You might be walking through an ordinary day, carrying thoughts that no one else knows about. Perhaps you have been praying quietly for direction. Perhaps your heart has been asking God for reassurance, for some small reminder that He is listening. In those moments, the Holy Spirit often begins to work in subtle ways that do not force attention but gently draw it. You notice something unexpected. Two animals appear together where you would not normally expect them. Maybe they move calmly across your path. Maybe they pause nearby as if the moment itself has slowed down. Their presence does not feel random. There is something about the timing, something about the peace of the moment that causes you to stop and simply watch. The natural mind might try to dismiss it quickly, but the spirit within you sometimes recognizes that the moment carries meaning. The Holy Spirit has a remarkable way of aligning moments in the natural world with the inner conversations happening in the heart. While we may not understand how these moments unfold, they often arrive with a quiet sense of divine timing. The appearance of two animals together can sometimes become a gentle confirmation that what you are sensing in your spirit is not merely imagination. God knows how easily human beings doubt themselves. We question our decisions. We question our prayers. We wonder whether the direction we feel in our hearts is truly from God or simply the result of our own thoughts. And because God understands this struggle, He sometimes provides confirmation in ways that bring peace to the soul. Not loud, not overwhelming, but unmistakably comforting. The pattern of two witnesses is not about the animals themselves. It is about the reminder that God often confirms what He is doing. When two things align in a moment of spiritual awareness, the heart begins to recognize that heaven may be speaking more clearly than we first realized. You see, the Holy Spirit is not interested in confusing the believer. His role is to guide, to reveal truth, and to strengthen faith. When a person is sincerely seeking God, the Holy Spirit often provides reassurance in ways that help the heart move forward with confidence. There are moments when someone has been praying deeply about a decision. They have asked God to lead them. They have asked for wisdom, for clarity, for confirmation that they are walking in the right direction. And then in a quiet moment during that season of seeking, something simple yet striking appears. Two animals cross their path together. Perhaps the moment lasts only seconds. Perhaps the animals pause briefly, almost as if the moment itself carries a calm stillness. The person watching feels something inside them become peaceful. It is not excitement, it is not fear. It is simply a gentle awareness that something about the timing feels meaningful. The Holy Spirit often communicates in ways that the heart understands before the mind can explain it. When that sense of peace settles into the spirit, it can feel as though heaven is whispering, "You are being seen. You are being guided." God's confirmations rarely come through chaos. They come through peace. And this is one of the ways the Holy Spirit protects the believer from misunderstanding spiritual moments. If something truly carries God's presence, it will not fill the heart with fear or confusion. Instead, it will bring calm assurance that God is near. When two animals appear together during a moment connected to prayer, reflection, or spiritual searching, it can become a quiet symbol of confirmation. Not something to chase or analyze endlessly, but something to receive with gratitude. A reminder that the God who created every living thing also knows how to use creation to gently touch the human heart. There is beauty in the simplicity of God's ways. He does not need elaborate displays to remind His children that He cares. Sometimes a brief moment in nature can carry more peace than 1,000 explanations. The Holy Spirit understands the language of the heart better than anyone. He knows when a person needs reassurance. He knows when someone is standing at a crossroads in life. He knows when a quiet confirmation can strengthen faith and renew courage. And so He works quietly, aligning moments that awaken awareness. But it is important to understand that these confirmations are not meant to replace faith. They are meant to support it. The believer is not called to chase signs or build their spiritual life around interpreting every unusual moment in nature. Instead, these moments simply serve as gentle reminders that God is active in ways we cannot always see. The focus always returns to Him. When someone experiences a moment like this, the healthiest response is not obsession but gratitude. Gratitude for the reminder that heaven is attentive. Gratitude for the realization that the Holy Spirit is closer than we often realize. Over time, as a person continues walking with God, they begin to understand something beautiful. The confirmations God provides are not meant to make life mysterious or confusing. They are meant to strengthen the relationship between the believer and the one who guides them. The heart learns to trust God more deeply. The spirit becomes more sensitive to His presence. And the believer begins to recognize that God's care is woven into the fabric of everyday life in ways that once went unnoticed. When two animals appear together at a moment that feels strangely connected to what your heart has been carrying, it may simply be the Holy Spirit offering a quiet confirmation that God is closer than you think. And sometimes that gentle confirmation is enough to remind your soul that heaven has been listening all along. There are moments in life when something shifts within the atmosphere around us, even though nothing visible seems to have changed. The air feels different. The heart becomes suddenly aware, almost as though another dimension has brushed gently against the world we can see. These moments are not always dramatic or overwhelming. Often they are quiet, subtle, and deeply personal. Yet for the one experiencing them, they carry a profound awareness that something sacred is taking place. The Holy Spirit has a remarkable way of drawing the human heart into these moments. He does not force the awareness upon us. Instead, He gently awakens our sensitivity to the presence of God. And when that sensitivity begins to grow, a person starts to realize that the spiritual world is not distant from the natural world at all. It has always been close, moving quietly alongside the life we live every day. Most people move through their daily routines focused entirely on what they can see, touch, and measure. The visible world becomes the center of their attention. Yet the truth is that the spiritual realm is just as real as the physical one. The difference is simply that our natural eyes cannot always perceive it. The Holy Spirit is the one who allows us to sense when the boundaries between these two realms feel thinner. Not because the spiritual world suddenly appears out of nowhere, but because our awareness becomes heightened. We begin to feel that heaven is nearer than we once believed. These moments often happen during seasons when the heart is seeking God more deeply. A person may be praying with unusual intensity, longing for guidance, comfort, or clarity. The spirit becomes open, attentive, waiting for God to respond. In that openness, the Holy Spirit begins to move in ways that make the believer aware that God is close. Sometimes this awareness arrives during quiet prayer. The room feels still in a way that cannot easily be explained. The heart becomes calm. The mind stops racing. A deep sense of peace fills the space, as though heaven itself has drawn near. Other times it happens during moments of emotional struggle. When a person feels overwhelmed, when life seems heavy and uncertain, they may suddenly sense a presence of comfort that goes beyond human explanation. It feels as though unseen hands are gently lifting the burden from their shoulders. These are moments when the spiritual and natural world seem to touch. The Holy Spirit does not reveal these experiences to create fear or confusion. He reveals them to remind us that the world we see is not the only reality that exists. God's presence surrounds us constantly, even when our senses fail to notice it. And sometimes during these moments of spiritual awareness, something unusual happens in the natural world around us. Creation itself seems to respond to the atmosphere of peace that the Holy Spirit brings. Animals, in particular, often appear in ways that feel strangely connected to the moment. Their behavior may seem calm, unafraid, almost as if they are aware of something peaceful unfolding around them. You might be standing quietly in prayer or reflection when two animals appear nearby. Perhaps they approach gently or cross your path together in a moment that feels strangely timed. There is nothing dramatic about it, yet the timing causes you to pause. Your heart recognizes that the moment feels different. Animals live with a natural sensitivity to their surroundings. They respond to the environment around them in ways that humans often overlook. When the atmosphere carries peace, when the presence of God fills a moment, creation sometimes reflects that harmony. The Holy Spirit may use such moments not to reveal the spiritual world directly, but to gently awaken the believer to the awareness that something sacred is happening. When two animals appear together during a moment of prayer, reflection, or spiritual seeking, it can become a quiet reminder that heaven is near. The moment itself becomes meaningful because of the connection between what is happening inside the heart and what appears in the natural world. The believer senses that the moment carries a deeper message, not because the animals themselves possess spiritual power, but because the Holy Spirit sometimes allows creation to mirror the peace and presence that heaven is releasing in that moment. Think about how gently God works in our lives. He rarely overwhelms us with displays that would frighten or confuse us. Instead, he allows small moments to awaken our awareness slowly and lovingly. When a person becomes sensitive to the presence of the Holy Spirit, they begin to recognize that life contains many sacred moments hidden within ordinary experiences. A quiet walk becomes a place of prayer. A still moment in nature becomes an encounter with peace. A simple sight becomes a reminder that God is present. And in those moments, the believer begins to realize something extraordinary. The boundary between the natural and the spiritual is not a wall. It is more like a veil that the Holy Spirit gently lifts when the heart is ready to understand. This realization changes the way a person views their life. They begin to see that heaven is not far away. It is actively involved in their journey. The struggles they face are not unseen. The prayers they whisper are not unheard. The path they walk is not unguarded. And sometimes the Holy Spirit allows a brief moment, two animals appearing together in quiet peace, to remind the heart that the spiritual world is touching the natural world more often than we realize. These moments are not meant to become the focus of our faith. They are simply reminders that God's presence surrounds us in ways that go beyond what we can measure or explain. The believer who understands this does not become obsessed with searching for signs. Instead, they become more aware of God's presence in every part of life. Their faith deepens because they recognize that heaven is not distant from the everyday moments they experience. Prayer becomes more meaningful. Trust becomes stronger. Peace becomes deeper. Because the heart now understands that the Holy Spirit is constantly moving, guiding, and revealing God's presence in ways both seen and unseen. And when the spiritual and natural worlds briefly touch in a quiet moment of awareness, the believer is reminded that heaven has been closer all along than they ever imagined. There is something very important the Holy Spirit always protects in the life of a believer, and that is the purity of our focus. God understands the human heart. He knows how easily people can become fascinated with the sign rather than the one who sent the sign. And so whenever the Holy Spirit allows moments in our lives that feel unusual or deeply meaningful, He always guides the heart back to the same truth. The purpose of every sign is to point us back to God. The Holy Spirit never intends for a person to become distracted by the symbol itself. The symbol is never the message. The symbol is only a gentle reminder of the greater reality behind it. This is very important to understand, especially when we speak about moments in which creation seems to align with our spiritual experiences. When two animals appear together during a moment of prayer, reflection, or spiritual awareness, the moment may feel significant. The timing may feel peaceful, almost intentional. But the Holy Spirit never asks us to place spiritual meaning in the animals themselves. Instead, He draws our attention upward. You see, God has always used the world around us as a reflection of His presence, but He has never asked His people to worship what He created. Creation points to the Creator. It reflects His beauty, His order, His wisdom, and His care. But it is not the source of the power. God alone holds that place. The Holy Spirit guards this truth carefully, because the human heart has a tendency to attach meaning to visible things. If we are not careful, we begin to focus more on the sign than on the voice of God that allowed the sign to appear. And the Holy Spirit will gently redirect us whenever that begins to happen. If someone experiences a moment when two animals appear during a time of prayer or reflection, the healthiest response is not curiosity that grows into obsession. The healthiest response is quiet gratitude. Gratitude that God may be reminding the heart that He is near. Gratitude that heaven is attentive to the life of the believer. But the focus must always return to God Himself. The Holy Spirit desires relationship above all else. He does not want believers to spend their lives searching for hidden messages in every unusual moment. He wants them to walk closely with God, trusting His presence whether signs appear or not. Faith grows strongest when it rests on God's character rather than on external experiences. And that is why the Holy Spirit always guides the believer back to prayer, back to trust, and back to the awareness that God's love is constant, whether we notice signs or not. Think about the tenderness of God's heart toward His children. When someone is going through a difficult season, when their faith feels fragile, the Holy Spirit may allow a small moment to remind them that heaven sees them. But that reminder is never meant to replace their relationship with God. It is meant to strengthen it. The moment becomes a gentle whisper from heaven saying, "I am here. I have not forgotten you." But after the moment passes, the believer is invited to continue walking in faith, not in dependence on the sign itself. The danger of focusing too heavily on signs is that the heart begins to search for them constantly. Every event becomes something to interpret. Every unusual moment becomes something to analyze. And slowly, without realizing it, the focus shifts away from God and toward the search for spiritual experiences. The Holy Spirit never leads His people into that kind of distraction. He leads them into deeper trust. When a believer understands this, they begin to see signs for what they truly are, gentle reminders rather than the foundation of faith. The foundation remains God Himself. So if two animals appear during a moment that feels spiritually significant, the believer simply receives the peace of that moment and offers thanks to God. There is no need to build complicated meanings around it. There is no need to search endlessly for hidden interpretations. The Holy Spirit communicates clearly through the peace He brings to the heart. If the moment truly carries God's presence, it will leave behind a sense of calm trust rather than restless curiosity. The believer will feel encouraged, reassured, and quietly reminded that God is near. And then life continues, prayer continues, faith continues. The Holy Spirit leads the believer forward, always drawing their attention back to the presence of God rather than to the moment itself. This is one of the ways the Holy Spirit protects us from misunderstanding spiritual experiences. He ensures that our devotion remains centered on the one who deserves all glory. Because no sign, no symbol, no moment in creation could ever replace the presence of God Himself. The beauty of the believer's life is not found in collecting spiritual experiences. It is found in walking daily with the God who loves them. And when signs appear along the journey, they simply become quiet reminders that the God we trust is actively involved in every detail of our lives. But the heart that truly understands the work of the Holy Spirit will never stop at the sign. It will always lift its eyes to the one who sent it. Because the greatest miracle is not the moment that captured our attention. The greatest miracle is that the living God is walking with us every step of the way. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when the heart begins to realize something beautiful and deeply comforting. Heaven has never been distant. For so long, many people walk through life believing that they must face everything on their own. They carry burdens quietly, they fight battles that no one else can see, and they whisper prayers in the silence of their hearts, hoping that somehow those prayers reach God. And yet the truth is far more wonderful than most people ever imagine. From the very beginning of our journey with God, His care surrounds us in ways that our natural eyes cannot always see. The Holy Spirit moves constantly in the lives of those who seek Him. He guides, He protects, He comforts, and sometimes He reveals small reminders that heaven is closer than we realize. When the Holy Spirit allows a moment to occur that awakens our awareness, perhaps through a peaceful encounter in creation, perhaps through two animals appearing at a moment when the heart is quietly praying, the purpose is never to create fear or confusion. The purpose is always the same, to remind us that God's protection surrounds our lives even when we cannot see it. And when that realization begins to settle into the heart, something powerful happens inside the believer. Fear begins to lose its hold. The uncertainty that once weighed heavily on the mind starts to lift. A quiet confidence grows within the spirit, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because the believer begins to understand that they are not walking their path alone. The Holy Spirit does not reveal moments like this, so that we will spend our lives trying to analyze them. Instead, He reveals them so that our faith becomes stronger. They become gentle reminders that heaven is attentive, that God's presence is real, and that His protection is active around us even when the world feels uncertain. Think about how many times people face situations that seem overwhelming. There are seasons when life feels like a storm that refuses to calm. Problems arise one after another. Questions fill the mind. The future feels unclear, and the heart begins to wonder whether things will ever become peaceful again. Yet even in those seasons, the Holy Spirit is working. He is guiding steps that the believer cannot yet see. He is arranging circumstances that will unfold at exactly the right moment. He is protecting in ways that will only become clear later. Sometimes a person looks back over their life and suddenly realizes that there were moments when things could have gone terribly wrong. A decision that seemed small at the time ended up leading them away from danger. A delay that once felt frustrating turned out to be protection. A sudden feeling to change direction prevented something harmful from happening. And when those realizations come, the heart begins to understand something extraordinary. God has been watching over every step. The Holy Spirit wants believers to live with that awareness, not in fear of the unknown, but in peace that comes from trusting God completely. When a person understands that heaven's protection surrounds them, they begin to walk differently. Their prayers become filled with deeper trust. Their worries begin to fade because they know that the God who guides the universe is also guiding their life. Even when they cannot see the path clearly, they know they are not alone on that path. This is the response the Holy Spirit desires when He allows moments that remind us of heaven's presence. The response is not fascination with the moment itself. The response is faith. Faith that grows stronger. Faith that rests more deeply in God's care. Faith that believes God is working even when the evidence is not immediately visible. When someone experiences a quiet moment in nature that feels connected to their prayers, perhaps two animals appearing together in a moment of stillness, the Holy Spirit may simply be reminding the heart of something it desperately needs to remember. God is near. His protection surrounds you. His guidance is active in your life. But after that reminder comes the most important part. The believer continues forward with renewed trust. Life continues, responsibilities remain, challenges still appear, but the heart is no longer carrying those challenges with the same heaviness. Something has changed within the spirit. There is peace where anxiety once lived. There is confidence where uncertainty once ruled. Because the believer now understands that their life is not left to chance. The God who created them is involved in every step they take. The Holy Spirit gently teaches us to live with this awareness every day, not just in the moments when signs appear, but in every moment of our lives. When we wake up in the morning, God is present. When we face decisions, God is guiding. When we walk through difficulty, God is strengthening us. When we feel weak, God is holding us up. The believer who understands this begins to live with a quiet courage that the world cannot easily explain. They know that even when circumstances are uncertain, God's protection has not changed, and that awareness transforms the way they see their future. Instead of fearing what might happen, they begin to trust the one who holds tomorrow in His hands. Instead of worrying about every possible outcome, they learn to rest in the knowledge that God is already present in the moments they have not yet reached. This is the gift the Holy Spirit gives when He reminds us of heaven's nearness. It is the gift of peace, the peace that comes from knowing that the God who loves us has never taken His eyes off our lives. So when the Holy Spirit allows a moment that gently awakens your awareness, when creation itself seems to pause long enough to remind you that heaven is near, receive that moment with gratitude. Let it strengthen your faith, let it deepen your trust, and then continue walking forward with the quiet confidence that the God who watches over you today will still be watching over you tomorrow. Because once the heart truly understands that heaven surrounds it, fear loses its power and faith begins to rise.